Uy! Pwede na, Alan? Hindi, tawagin. Di ba, we will not yet call the roll. We will not yet call the roll. The 56th session of the Senate, in the third regular session of the 16th Congress, is hereby called to order. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay will lead the chamber in prayer.
Panginoon, kami po ay humaharap sa inyo na puno ng pasasalamat sa mga biyayang ipinagkaloob ninyo sa araw-araw. Sa loob ng nakalipas na 70 araw, nagkampi-kampi at nagkawatak-watak ang aming bayan upang isulong ang kanya-kanyang interes, plataporma at programa. Nananalangin po kami ngayon na hilumin ninyo ang mga sugat na idinulot ng nakaraang eleksyon upang mabuong muli ang bayan naming Pilipinas. Gawin mo po kaming instrumento ng pagtanggap at pagkakasundo upang mapag-isang muli ang bayan ninyong hinirang. Gawaran po ninyo kami ng pusong mapagpatawad upang itayong muli ang mga nawasak na relasyon, pagkakaibigan, at pagkakaisa tungo sa mas matibay na institusyon at organisasyon. Naway manahan sa aming mga puso ang pagkakaisa at pagdadamayan, lalong-lalo na sa mga itinalagang leader ng aming bansa. Pagkalooban mo po kami ng lakas at tatag ng loob upang lalo pa naming mapagsilbihan ang aming mga kababayan sa lahat ng pagkakataon. Patnubayan mo po kami sa araw-araw, Panginoon, sa aming pagtupad sa tungkulin naming iangat at bigyang ginhawa ang buhay ng bawat Pilipino. Ang lahat ng ito'y idinadalangin namin sa inyong Panginoon. Siya nawa. Amen.
Amen. Marami pong salamat, Senator Binay. The Senate Choir will lead the chamber in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, after which they will render the song entitled Paraiso.
Sa langit mong bakaw, may nilagang tula. If you promise to bring out your best books, boss. I can use to, I can use. Meron tayong lima ba? Oh, ay, sorry, magaling daw. Shoulder daw. Huwag lang ma-injure, ha? Baka magalit sa atin. Sikat siya sa internet, eh. Talaga ganun.
I-release mo lang ito.
The stars are inside. You know, they so medyo scarred.
The Secretary will now call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano Pia S, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Hunasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Trilon.
14 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. The majority leader is recognized.
I'll just pass the joint weapon. Good afternoon, Mr. President, or dear colleagues. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 55th session on Wednesday, February 3, 2016, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none, so approved.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Concurrent Resolution number 10.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of the proposed Senate concurrent resolution number 10 is in order.
May I request the Secretary to read the said
The Secretary will read
resolution.
the resolution.
Concurrent resolution providing that the Senate and the House of Representatives hold a joint public session to canvass the votes cast for President and Vice President in the elections held on May 9, 2016, and proclaim the President-elect and Vice President-elect. Resolved by the Senate, the House of Representatives of the Philippines concurring that both Houses of Congress of the Philippines hold a joint public session on May 24, 2016 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the session hall of the House of Representatives to canvass the votes cast for President and Vice President on the elections held on May 9, 2016, and proclaim the President-elect and Vice President-elect adopted. Signed, Senator Cayetano.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 10.
Any objection? The chair hears none. Concurrent resolution number 10, providing that the Senate and the House of Representatives hold a joint public session to canvass the votes for President and Vice President in the elections of May 9, 2016, and proclaim the President-elect and the Vice President-elect is hereby approved.
Mr. President, may we recognize the Minority Leader, Senator Juan Ponce Enrile.
Senator Enrile is recognized. What is the pleasure of the gentleman from Cagayan, sir?
Yeah, Mr. President, I would like to beg the indulgence of the Senate to make a manifestation, a short manifestation.
Please proceed, Senator Enrile.
Mr. President, 17 years ago, the Philippine Senate voted to concur in the ratification of the Visiting Forces Agreement, VFA, between the Philippines and the United States. As early as then, I had already anticipated that our country would sooner or later be faced with the threats posed by China on our national security. Noting at that time how weak and inadequate our defense and security position, I based my vote on the VFA on my knowledge of the imperatives of our national interest and survival, particularly in the light of China's expansionist designs and its covetous movement towards us, born by her own interests and peculiar domestic problems. At that time, China had already started establishing extensive military fortifications on the Mischief Reef. Much earlier on, they did so too on the Paracels. I had hoped then that the Philippine government would undertake the necessary actions to prepare ourselves and our people for such an eventuality. Evidently, however, my forewarning had fallen on deaf ears, as we are now faced with an even more volatile situation in the South China Sea, a situation which apparently worsened after the Philippines, through the present administration, filed a claim against China before the arbitral tribunal established under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It has now created another expansive artificial island complete with airfields, airstrips, and docks, and fortifications in the South China Sea. As we stand at the crossroad of our nation's political history, and as Congress commences to carry out its constitutional duty and mandate to canvass the votes for President and Vice President in the recent general elections, this representation humbly appeals to our national leaders, both incumbent and the members of the incoming administration and the outgoing administration, to carefully study not only the history of our territorial claims, not only the history of our territorial claims in the South China Sea, but also to the different options available to us on how we must address this problem henceforth. At this juncture, Mr. President, this representation would like to submit to the body with the request that this be inserted in the record of the Senate. Copies of the speeches and letters of Attorney Estelito P. Mendoza, at one time the Solicitor General of this country and Secretary of Justice, and one who understood, because he worked with former Senator Arturo Tolentino in the negotiation of the law of the sea. On this matter, now bothering us in the South China Sea, and his main speech recently delivered before the Rotary Club of Manila is entitled Build Up of Armed Might in the South China Sea, Portents of War on Our Land, as well as of his letters to the members of this chamber on 2 occasions where he urged the Senate to look into the confluence of events that led to the filing of our claim challenging China's 9-dash line, perhaps as a starting point for the determination of what would be the best course of action to take to strengthen our position on the South China Sea problem. These documents, Mr. President, will hopefully provide another perspective by which the South China Sea problem may be studied and addressed for our sake, but most of all for the sake of the future generation of this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Enrile. May the chair inquire from Senator Enrile where these documents are? Is it already in the possession of the Secretariat, sir?
Mr. President, I have a complete file here, and I'm going to submit it to the Secretariat.
Yes, thank you, Senator Enrile. So make it of record that the good senator,
including a copy of the manifestation.
Senator Enrile is submitting to the Secretariat the documents, the letters, speeches of former Secretary of Justice Estelito Mendoza, and the Secretariat is directed to make this part of the record. Thank you, Senator Enrile.
Sir President, may we recognize the Deputy Minority Leader for a parliamentary inquiry?
Senator Soto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, the Majority Leader. May I just inquire on the just approved Senate resolution, concurrent resolution number 10. May I know if when we convene tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Mr. President, there will be a roll call as far as the Senate is concerned?
Mr. President, I think the agenda for tomorrow will be distributed, and I think it's included in the draft of the rules as I looked at the 2004-2010 rules. So there will be a roll call, and then there will be an approval of the rules. After the approval of the rules, assuming it is approved, then a committee shall be formed by the Speaker of the House and the Senate President that will meet day to day to canvass. And once it is completed, then both chambers will again call the roll and will convene to proclaim the President-elect and the Vice President-elect.
So that exercise will be done tomorrow
Yes.
in the House of Representatives,
Yes.
and therefore we need a quorum
Yes.
on the
We need a quorum to convene and also to
convene.
approve the rules.
Yes, and the rules will be provided. Are we given a copy of the rules already? May we be refreshed? Some of us were not here in 2004.
Mr. President, I asked for a copy of the 204 and 2010 rules, and it should be distributed today. And if the Secretariat of the Senate, in coordination with the Secretariat of the House, have any proposed amendments, it shall be provided to us. But the information given to me is that there will be minimal or no amendments. No?
And if ever a member of the Senate wishes to propose an amendment, we can do that tomorrow.
The senator,
the-
any member of the chamber can propose amendments. That has to be voted by both chambers, voting separately.
Voting separately. So You mean, Mr. President, the rules that you exercised in 2010?
2004. I was not in there in 2010.
Yeah, both of us,
President.
no, we're not there.
Sir President,
2004.
to expedite, with the permission of the Deputy Minority Leader, may I just ask the Secretariat to give all the members a copy of the 2004-2010 rules and the draft rules that they are now working on in coordination with the House?
Yes,
Then maybe we can...
But I mean, if tomorrow we wish to propose an amendment, it has to be approved by both houses.
Yes, voting separately.
Therefore, if the Senate approves it and the House does not,
It is not,
It is
the rules
not.
are approved.
it is lost.
Yes.
All right.
So
Thank you,
by
Mr.
June
President.
30,
Yeah.
you know what will happen if they have no rules. Sir.
No, I mean, for any particular amendment, I mean, I'm sure the rules will be approved, but that depends on the amendments that might be proposed. Might, I am not
Okay.
thinking of anything
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, 1 minute suspension just to confer with the... Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading Senate Bill number 2239, Mr. President.
In objection, hearing none, consideration of the measure on third reading is in order.
With the consent of the body, may you request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 2239, an act requiring all franchise holders or operators of television stations and producers of television programs to broadcast or present their programs with closed captions options and for other purposes.
Mr. President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all the members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya Ruiz, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Ligarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Rilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstentions. Senate Bill 2239 is hereby approved on third reading.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 2817, Mr. President.
In objection, hearing none, in order.
With the consent of our colleagues, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 2817, an act separating Tikagasat National High School Magsaysay Annex, ing Barangay Magsaysay, Municipality of Cordon, Province of Isabela, from Tikagasat National High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Cordon National High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the Philippine Constitution specifically the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, PIS, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 senators are present. I'm sorry, 14 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 2817 is hereby approved of third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 6144.
In objection, hearing none, consideration on third reading is in order.
With the consent of our colleagues, may I request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6144, an act establishing the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines, providing for the purpose of amalgamation and of the Mindanao University of Science and Technology and the Misamis Oriental State College of Agriculture and Technology and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading had been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, PIS, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6144 is approved on third reading.
Sir President, may we recognize and congratulate the President of Mindanao University of Science and Technology, and he's also the President of the Association of State Universities and Colleges, Dr. Ricardo Rotoras and party, who is here with us today.
The President is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. With consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading Senate Bill number 3204.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may I request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 3204, an act requiring basic education students to undergo age-appropriate basic life support training.
Sir President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 11, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the Philippine Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct a roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, PIS, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon. 14
affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstentions. Senate Bill 3204 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 6011.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may I request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6011, an act granting Veritas Media Arts, Inc. a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain radio and television broadcasting stations in the province of Bohol and the Visayas.
Sir President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members last September 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, PIS, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6011 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I ask for a minute suspension to consult with the minority leader?
Suspended for 1 minute.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 5601, Mr. President.
Any objection, hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
With the consent of our colleagues, may you request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary.
House
Will do
Bill
so.
number 5601, an act extending to another 25 years the franchise granted to the Philippine Telegraph and Telephone Corporation, PTNT, to establish, install, maintain, and operate wire and/or wireless telecommunication systems, lines, circuits, and stations throughout the Philippines for public, domestic, and international communications under Republic Act number 4161 as amended.
Sir President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the requirements of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Sangara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano PS, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 5601 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 6005.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6005, an act granting the Infinivan Inc. a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain telecommunication systems throughout the Philippines.
Sir President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under required by the 1987 Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senator Sangara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano PS, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6005 is approved on third reading.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 6193.
Consideration of the measure is in order.
With the consent of the body, may request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6193, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Kalayaan Broadcasting System Incorporated under Republic Act number 7303 as amended by Republic Act number 8105, entitled an act granting the Kalayaan Broadcasting System Incorporated a franchise to construct, install, operate, and maintain radio broadcasting stations in the island of Mindanao and for other purposes.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6193 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading House Bill number 6314.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6314, not granting the Mega Manila Telecom Corporation a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain telecommunication systems throughout the Philippines.
Sir President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6314 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 6312.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of measure is in order.
With the consent of the body, we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and the Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6312, anak granting the Metro Connections and Telecom Corporation a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain telecommunication systems throughout the Philippines.
Sir President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure in third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6312 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill 6168.
Consideration of the measure is in order.
With the consent of our colleagues, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6168, anak amending the franchise granted to Buyers Communications, Inc. under Republic Act number 8107, expanding its scope into a national coverage and renewing its term for another 25 years.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the requirements of the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure in third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6168 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading House Bill number 2185.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 2185, an act granting the First Bay Power Corporation, FBPC, a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain a distribution system for the conveyance of electric power to end users in the municipality of Bawan, province of Batangas.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the requirements of the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
The Honorable Senator Sangara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 2185 is approved on third reading.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading House Bill number 6003.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6003, an act granting the AMA Telecommunications Inc. a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain telecommunication systems in the Philippines.
Mr. President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senator Sangara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6003 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading House Bill 6315.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6315, an act granting the Pilipinas Radio Waves Corporation a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain radio and or television broadcasting stations throughout the Philippines.
Sir President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the requirements of the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senator Sangara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6315 is hereby approved on third reading.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading House Bill 6313.
Secretary, the consideration of the measure is in order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6313, an act granting the Makinig Network Inc. a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain radio and PR and or television broadcasting stations throughout the Philippines.
Sir President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure in third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Compañero S, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6313 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 6053.
What about House Bill 5942, may we know why this is being skipped?
Mr. President, there are questions by some members who requested that that be not taken up today.
This is on third reading. I do not know if questions can still be raised. May I know why this cannot be called today?
Well, Mr. President, as our tradition dictates, when there is a senator who has inquiries or concerns with a certain bill, just like the LPG bill, which was initially scheduled, but there are some members who also have concerns. And since all the candidates in the election brought up telecoms and the internet as a major issue, upon some of the members calling this representation up and looking at the franchise of smart communications, they have a franchise until 2017. So it might be wiser to give these members more time to consider, Mr. President.
May we just ask the view of the Chairman of the Committee on Public Services, Senator Sergio Osmeña, on this point. Senator Osmeña, Senator Osmeña? Senator Osmeña, Senator Serge, as Chairman of the Committee on Public Services, you have submitted to the floor and to the plenary, and the plenary has approved it on second reading, House Bill number 5942. This was on February 4, we approved this in second reading. The Majority Leader has stated that there are questions being raised, and therefore he'll ask for a deferment. The way we know the view of the Secretary of the Chairman of the Committee on Public Works.
May I have a 1 minute suspension?
1 minute suspension. Session is
Move to
resumed.
resume.
Senator Osmeña is recognized.
Mr. President, at the suggestion of some of our colleagues, headed by the Minority Leader, we have no objection to postponing consideration of the Smart Communications franchise. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. With the manifestation of the Chairman of the Committee on Public Services, with the concurrence of the Minority Leader, and upon motion of the Majority Leader, the consideration of House Bill 5942 on third reading is hereby deferred.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill 6053.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6053, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Zoe Broadcasting Inc., amending for the purpose Republic Act 7279, entitled an act granting to Zoe Broadcasting Network Inc. a franchise to construct, install, operate, and maintain radio and television broadcasting stations throughout the Philippines and for other purposes, as amended by Republic Act number 7968.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor, Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6053 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill 5859.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 5859, anak, renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to People's Broadcasting Service, Inc. under Republic Act number 7477 as amended by Republic Act number 9213.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading.
The Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor, Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 5859 is approved on third reading.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 6021.
In objection, hearing none, in order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6021, anak, granting the Filipinas Asian Pearl Airways, Inc. a franchise to establish, operate, and maintain domestic and international air transport services.
Mr. President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 4, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the Philippine Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure in third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor, Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6021 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill 5511.
In objection, hearing none, in order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 5511, anak, establishing the Southwestern Tagalog region to be known as the Mimaropa region.
Sir President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate on February 10, 2016, thereby complying with the requirements of the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.S., Defensor, Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 5511 is approved on third reading.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill 6152.
In objection, hearing none, is in order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice into inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 6152, anak, declaring the province of Batanes as a responsible community-based cultural heritage and ecotourism zone.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to members of the Senate last February 10, 2016, thereby complying with the requirements of the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure on third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Rector, Villa, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 6152 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading Senate Bill 2794.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 2794, not providing for a new anti-carnapping law of the Philippines.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 10, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, no abstention. Senate Bill 2794 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading Senate Bill number 29.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 29, an act prohibiting the discrimination on the employment of any individual on the basis merely of age.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the Philippine Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Rector, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. Senate Bill number 29 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading Senate Bill number 449.
In order.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary is directed to do so.
Senate Bill number 449, an act honoring and granting additional benefits and privileges to Filipino centenarians and for other purposes.
Copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 10, 2016. In compliance with the Philippine Constitution, we are now ready to approve the measure in third reading. I ask for a roll call vote, Mr. President.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, Alan, Peter, Companya, Ruiz, Cayetano, P.I.S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. Senate Bill number 449 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading House Bill 5576.
The Secretary, the consideration of the measure is in order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the said bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 5576, an act declaring tourism development areas in the province of Camiguin, organizing the Camiguin Tourism Council and mandating support for tourism development in the province of Camiguin.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 10, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule provided under the Philippine Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure on third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano P.S., Defensor Santiago Ejercito, Enrile Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Onasan, Lapid, Ligarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
15 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 5576 is hereby approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill 3145.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice into inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
House Bill number 3145, an act creating an additional branch of the Regional Trial Court with seat at Calapan City, Oriental Mindoro, in the 4th Judicial Region, further amending for the purpose Batas Pambansa, Bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 11, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure on third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senator Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano P.S., Defensor Santiago Ejercito, Enrile Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Ligarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. House Bill 3145 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading Senate Bill number 3209.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the record and the Senate Journal the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 3209, an act providing stronger measures against unlawful practices, businesses, and schemes of matching and offering Filipinos to foreign nationals for purposes of marriage or common law partnership, repealing for the purpose Republic Act number 6955, also referred to as the Anti-Mail Order Bride Law.
Mr. President, copies of the measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to all members of the Senate last February 11, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule required under the Philippine Constitution. We are ready to approve the measure in third reading. I move for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano P.S., Defensor Santiago Ejercito, Enrile Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention. Senate Bill 3209 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider in third reading Senate Bill number 3205.
In order.
With the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal Record the whole text thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 3205, an act mandating the integration of Filipino Muslim and indigenous peoples' history, culture, and identity in the study of Philippine history in both basic and higher education.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 10, 2016, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under the Philippine Constitution. We are thus ready to approve the measure in third reading. I ask for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Roll call vote on Senate Bill number 3205. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano P.S., Defensor Santiago Ejercito, Enrile Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
13 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstentions. Senate Bill 3205 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we recognize Senator Marcos to speak on a matter of public interest.
On the privileged hour, Senator Marcos is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I take the floor on a matter of personal and collective privilege and on a particular matter concerning not only this representation, but the entire Filipino electorate as well. This is no ordinary resumption of regular session by Congress. First, we have resumed our regular session on the heels of the automated national and local election 14 days ago, an election which was much anticipated after our characteristically wild and frenetic campaign season. Second, the recently concluded elections saw no less than 13 of our colleagues in the Senate, including this representation, vying as candidates for various positions. I congratulate the newly elected and presumptive President of the Republic of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, as well as the 12 newly proclaimed senators of the land who will soon grace this hallowed hall and lend their talent and brand of public service to the Filipino people. I congratulate and hail my presidential candidate, Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago, for braving the rigors and stresses of this whirlwind campaign despite her health issues. We have come a long way since we as a people resolved to automate our elections. Indeed, automation is the way to go. But in doing so, we must not lose sight of the state's policy for doing this. Our automated election system should be one that will ensure the secrecy and sanctity of the ballot and all election consolidation and transmission documents in order that the process shall be transparent and credible and that the results shall be fast, accurate, and reflective of the genuine will of the people. COMELEC Chair Andres Bautista was quoted as saying that what we want to show the world is how the elections are being conducted in the Philippines. He even said that while before we were just learning from other countries, now we are teaching them international best practices. In this age of digital media, the very technology that allowed us the automated option in the first place, the COMELEC chairman has been given and extended advice and assistance, solicited or not, by netizens all over the country via various social media and other networks. Netizens were able to capture footage and other evidence of cheating and other abhorrent election offenses from different parts of our archipelago. Our countrymen are now not only aware of, but also knowledgeable about computers and other digital devices. As captured by netizens through photos and videos, we see the same sad story in the Philippines. Vote buying has become ever more rampant, as have been the acts of terrorism, threats, and intimidation. We have received reports of information and communications technology companies that were engaged by candidates to boost their chances in winning these automated elections. Parts of the package included access to official voters' database and vaunted magic laptops, which they claimed could tap into the COMELEC's main server. I came across these companies and these groups, but I brushed aside all these offers as being mere hearsay until I saw it happening before my and the country's very eyes on the day of election. On or about 7:30 in the evening on May 9, Smartmatic's Marlon Garcia, a Venezuelan national, admitted entering a new script or computer command in the PPCRV transparency server. Note that this change was not done before the elections, not when they were doing the pre-testing, but during the transmission of results from our canvassing boards nationwide. It was after this particular act of computer programming wizardry that votes for this representation started to slow down, and the votes for another candidate started to accelerate at an unprecedented and linear rate of 45,000 votes for every additional 1% of votes counted. This, by the way, is the very same Marlon Garcia who was charged with electoral sabotage for doing the very same thing during the 2013 elections. What are the chances that this computer programming change can be linked to the odd pattern that emerged during the PPCRV quick count? How sure are we that the computer change did not open windows of opportunity for trapdoors or Trojan horses, worms, or time bombs to enter the system? COMELEC Chair Andy Bautista claims that the programming change in the transparency server was nothing more than a cosmetic change, and that the same did not alter the results of the elections. What proof do we have of this? We have seen none. We have not seen any proof whatsoever. Last week, I formally wrote to COMELEC and personally asked them to allow my IT experts to examine their servers. I made sure each and every commissioner was given a copy of my request. Not one of them has replied to any such request. Unlike FPJ, they have not even been noted. I have to ask myself, why is COMELEC turning a blind eye to the quantum of proof that is before them? Every day, netizens post new photos and videos of election fraud. Police found thousands of pre-shaded ballots in an abandoned warehouse in Alaminos, Pangasinan. Unused SD cards were found in a trash can in Cabangcalan, Negros Occidental. There is a video of election fraud in Datu Ampatuan, Maguindanao. And yet, COMELEC has done nothing. They would rather concentrate on immediate proclamation in the hope that the uproar will die down soon after. All these reports give us a clear sense of how the terrain of our electoral process has evolved since automation. Now it is clear that we are waging the battle on two fronts, on the ground level and in the field of computer science and programming. I recall the words of Dr. Rubin, an American computer expert, speaking on automated elections when it was first implemented in the United States. My biggest fear is that someone would program a machine to give a wrong answer. If that were to happen, the machine would still work fine. We just wouldn't know that it had given the wrong answer. Another added, any time a program is changed, it can change things that you do not see. You can tell a computer to behave badly in thousands of different ways. So unless we have a strict, transparent, and unblemished auditing procedure, anyone with access to the central count machine can hack an election. In this highly contentious, hard-fought vice presidential race, COMELEC must accomplish its constitutional mandates of 1. Enforcing and administering all laws and regulations relative to the conduct of elections. 2. Deciding all questions affecting elections. And 3. Ensuring free, orderly, honest, peaceful, credible, and informed elections. We should not accept on mere blind faith the representations of the contractor and the reflected data on their machines. The burden of proof should be upon them and COMELEC as well, that the integrity of the system has not been compromised. COMELEC should not allow that the secrecy of the ballot be turned into the secrecy of the vote count. Congress shall shortly convene into a national board of canvassers for the election results of the presidency and the vice presidency. As all other presidential candidates have conceded and no questions surround the votes that he has received, I propose the immediate proclamation of our presumptive president, Rodrigo Duterte, being the clear and uncontested winner in the presidential election. Again, I offer him my sincere congratulations and my hand in friendship and partnership for the future. Mr. President, the Philippines now looks to you for your leadership and vision. However, I humbly but firmly reiterate my strong reservations in the canvassing of the results of the vice presidential elections on the basis of electoral irregularities on the two fronts that I have mentioned. I raise all these for the millions of Filipinos who voted for me and all the other voters whose votes were, quote unquote, lost and remain uncounted. Your votes genuinely and properly reflect your will and your trust in me. I will forever be grateful. I vow to fight for the disenfranchised, whose votes were either prevented, diverted, or declared invalid and thrown away, that their true choice be counted and be included. My fellow Filipinos, today I speak not about myself or about my candidacy. I speak about our nation and our country's future. What is at stake today is the sanctity of suffrage, which great leaders teach us must be guarded at every turn. Many attribute the phrase, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, to Thomas Jefferson. It is so very true. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Today, amidst controversy, cross-accusation, and confusion, our nation needs more than ever eternal vigilance. We need leaders who are less interested in promoting their own interest and their own party, and more interested in leaving behind the enduring example of free and fair elections. In this chamber, I stand second to no one in understanding that we here in the Philippines have not always achieved this. But I remind even my most ardent critics, ours is a nation and a history that proves able to learn, to adjust, to self-correct, and to move forward. But moving forward demands that we each pay the sacred price of eternal vigilance. And as we review these threats to free and fair elections, no amount of politics, of carelessness, or outright deceit will ultimately ever be excused by the people. This odious legacy of this government and the allegations surrounding it cannot be left uninvestigated. Evidence cannot be left unreviewed, and truth cannot be left unspoken, because truth is the lifeblood of eternal vigilance. Fellow senators, we cannot hold false confidence that we had free and fair elections if we did not. Our colleague, Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago, warns us now of a garrison state where the authoritarian government feels free to manufacture numbers as they are needed. No less an authority than Abraham Lincoln reminds us, election belongs to the people. We should listen to these words. No one, no president, no party, no backroom, no machine, no operative has the right to thwart the will of the people. Elections belong to the people. No one has the right to use political advantage to influence or manipulate the election. And we never, ever can let that happen. Because what is at stake is our future and the future of our country. In this chamber, our job is to fight those who want to keep taking us backwards. 2 days before the May 9th election, I said, we must, all of us, guard against coming intimidation, manipulation, and even fraud by forces of the political status quo. This is truer today than it was 2 weeks ago. In fact, if anything, we now need more eternal vigilance today than we did last May 9th. Again, this is not about one candidate against another, or one family versus another, or one party versus another. This is not about a foreign technology vendor scandal. This is about eternal vigilance. Even if you are satisfied with the results of the May 9th election, it remains our job to rise above politics and protect the sanctity of each and every single vote. In closing, we might all ask ourselves a question that will endure beyond each of our time here. What can we learn from this? In fact, we are too good a people, too great a nation, with too great an ability to adjust and to take our democratic processes forward to not learn from this. We are simply too great a nation to not learn once more the awesome power and the sacred responsibility of eternal vigilance. Today, as tomorrow, this will require real change, this will require real courage. And again, and again, and again, this will require eternal vigilance. Fellow Filipinos, join me in calling for more eternal vigilance. At stake is our country's future. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Will the gentleman from Ilocos yield to a few questions?
I will yield to questions, but with the understanding that I will decline to answer anything on the merits of some of the complaints and the accusations and the allegations that have been made as to the irregularities of the conduct of the campaign and its counting, simply because I believe that this is not the proper forum for that. But
Mr. President, would you be willing to...
I would yield the floor to Senator Aquino.
Would you be willing to answer a few questions on the speech that you had made?
Certainly.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, Mr. President, I would like to echo also the call of the Senator from Ilocos Norte for eternal vigilance. I think right now that is the call for all of us, all of the candidates, all of the people in the different campaign teams to be vigilant, because as we know, the counting isn't over yet. No? And as Senator Marcos's camp is eternally vigilant, I'm sure the other camps are also vigilant as well to make sure that nothing untoward happens during the canvassing process. So let me ask a few questions regarding some of the points that Senator Marcos had raised. Mr. President, you talked about the changes in the transparency server. And to be frank, that was very troublesome, I think, for all of us when we found out that the transparency server was changed right there and then. In fact, I think COMELEC castigated Smartmatic for having done that. But Mr. President, I'd like to clarify that this was done to the transparency server. Are you alleging that this was also done to the two other servers with an independent mechanism compared to the transparency server, Mr. President?
It is precisely why I have requested and have yet to receive any comment, answer, or even acknowledgement of that request to look into the COMELEC server and to have my IT experts look into the COMELEC server to see if this manipulation, interference, changes had been done. So unfortunately, those requests have fallen on deaf ears thus far.
So in short, Mr. President, your call for a full audit is to find out if there were any irregularities in the two other servers.
Well, amongst other things, yes.
So in short, Mr. President, currently, we only know that the transparency server was modified, and of course the story was because of the cosmetic change, but you want to check if there were also changes in the two other servers.
Well, we would also like to check whatever happened, as I think has been explained in the various media. The fact that you have entered or you changed, the values of the hash code have changed, simply indicates that the file was entered into. How many times it was entered into, what was done while the file was open, or the operator was in the file and changing different parts of it, we cannot tell. And that's why this assurance that we are being given, that it was merely a cosmetic change, simply has no proof behind it, merely the assurances. But I think it is unanimous thus far that so long as the file has been opened and remains open, which it did, it remained open until until about 8 o'clock on May 8 a.m. on May 10th, at which point when this was brought up, it was later in the day on May 10th, until it was brought up by some of the watchers, and another Venezuelan operative of Smartmatic says, "I'll fix it," and basically locked the file open, and thereby leaving it open for anyone to come. So whatever changes were made over and above the so-called ENYA change, then we cannot tell. That is why we have asked to look at the audit logs, we have asked to look at the transmission logs, we have asked to look at the receiving logs, we have asked to look at all of the records so that we can be sure that the different values have remained consistent all throughout.
On that note, Mr. President, I think parties have come on record, even Congresswoman Robredo, to say that we are open to a full audit, and to open up.
Unfortunately, those parties will not be the ones to decide whether or not we can go in. and have a look at the servers, it is only the COMELEC who can give that authority.
That's true, Mr. President. I just wanted to state that for the record. No? But going back to the question on the transparency server, I take it, Mr. President, you don't accept the COMELEC's their explanation of what had happened. They had come out very strongly to say that this was merely a cosmetic change. And
Well,
in fact,
I can stand here and say many things, Mr. President, but I have to back it up with data, with proof, with evidence of that, and they have not done that.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you're saying it yourself that any accusation must be backed up with the proper data, with the proper numbers. And currently, Mr. President, right now, your assertions on the transparency server, is there any data, or you are merely calling
yes.
for
Oh,
you are
yes.
merely
No,
calling
no,
for
no, no, no.
opening up of the server for scrutiny, Mr. President?
No, quite the contrary, Mr. President. We wouldn't have bothered asking all of these authorizations to go in had we not spotted many discrepancies that need to be clarified. This is not a fishing expedition. It is something that is clearly in aid of clarifying the irregularities that were clearly seen and admitted to by both COMELEC and Smartmatic.
Mr. President, are you referring to the ENIA problem, or are you referring to the so-called trend that you were mentioning earlier? What irregularity in particular are you exactly talking about?
Again, there are many, too many, I think, for us to go through here. We have, as I said when I spoke, that I will, at the proper time and the proper place, will detail those irregularities, those discrepancies that we have found. And furthermore, to back those up, will be reports, will be analyses, will be affidavits, statements from witnesses, and I think, and many whistleblowers as well who have come forward and have decided to come clean about their part in all of this.
So, Mr. President, you're saying that you have evidence and data, but you don't wish to say it today.
Exactly. I do not think that in an interpolation on the plenary floor is the place to do it. I think that when the canvassing starts, these will be detailed to the canvassing board when we have begun.
Well, Mr. President, one thing that you mentioned earlier was about the change in the trend. No? You talked about, I think, around 8 p.m. when when the trend started to go against you and for Congresswoman Robredo. And I'd just like to mention, Mr. President, for the record, that numerous academicians have actually said that there is nothing irregular about that. And in fact, Mr. President,
and for that matter, Mr. President, numerous academicians have said that there is. So it is not, that is...
Two, Mr. President, you have two academicians who actually said that there were irregularities.
Ano ba to? Paramihan ng academician o naghahanap tayo ng katotohanan?
Mr. President, if I may finish my question. And in that course, Mr. President, a number of academicians have said that the likelihood for the simplest answer is true. That in the first few hours, the votes came from NCR, Region 1, Region 2, and of course, Mr. President, you won handily in many of these areas. And at around the time that you had mentioned, these are when votes that came from other areas from the Philippines, where Congresswoman Robredo won, started to come in. Mr. President, a lot of, if you look at where these votes came from, the explanation is not as fantastic as maybe a hash code change or a hacking that had happened. But there are records, Mr. President, and I join you in asking COMELEC to open up these records to show where exactly these votes had come from.
At the proper time, Mr. President, I will show that trend did not depend on the early returns of votes that came from regions 1, 2, 3, or wherever I am perceived to have been strong. The transmittal of votes, you have to separate the two, the official COC from the provincial canvasser and the transmitted votes from the precincts. As you know, the precinct votes were transmitted immediately upon closure of the precinct. And the COCs were only transmitted upon completion of the provincial canvass. So if we were to look at the actual precincts that had reported, that had transmitted results, then that contention that it is only from regions 1, 2, and 3 that came in first is simply not true. Perhaps the first that came in were from those areas, but in small percentages. So that if you look at the percentages of votes that had actually come in from different places, it was fairly even.
Mr. President, on another note, we talked about the unfortunate change that Smartmatic did.
Unfortunate, Mr. President? I think I would characterize it as rather more than unfortunate. It is illegal.
Yes, Mr. President, and I think COMELEC itself has already castigated Smartmatic for that.
Castigating Smartmatic does not remedy the situation. How was it allowed to happen? How was it allowed that the password of the COMELEC was used by a Smartmatic staff operative employee was allowed to use the COMELEC password to make that change without an end bank resolution authorizing such a change? That is a question that, as to this day, we have yet to find an answer.
And we join you, Mr. President, in trying to find out the answers to these queries. Mr. President, what I would like to ask is that if you are averring that these changes affected the elections, are you also saying that it only affected the vice presidential race?
I do not know what happened. Exactly. This is the whole point. We do not know what happened when Marlon Garcia opened the file and changed the so-called ENIAC. What else did he change? Did he change more? Did he change nothing? Did he change my name? Did he change the numbers? What did he do? What else did he do? And after he had done whatever it is he had to do, what else did anyone, since the file was then open, what else did anyone go in and change afterwards? And after the file was locked open, that was by putting the first hash code after the second hash code, thereby essentially locking it open. Who else went into that file and made alterations? We don't know. That is the whole point of what we are trying to talk about. What happened? What is it? If we can be shown that the changes were indeed cosmetic, you will never hear about this from me again. But
Yes, Mr. President.
we still have to determine whether or not anything else was changed, what changes were made, who made them, and under whose authority.
And more importantly, Mr. President, who should be penalized for that? I think you will agree with me on that, no, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'm sure that is part of the question, but I think more to the point is we need to find out exactly what happened. We have to be sure that the conduct of the elections were in fact fair and honest and transparent. That is to this point not the case, simply because we have not received any answers from COMELEC on the questions that we have raised to them. And we also have not received any authorization to inspect the servers and the logs as we have asked the COMELEC.
Mr. President, just a final question. Mr. President, kung kayo na po mismo nagsabi na hindi ho natin alam kung meron ngang nangyari, hindi ho ba premature na sabihin na may pandarayang nangyayari? Kayo na po mismo nagsabi, hindi natin alam kung ano yung nangyari.
Wala pa akong sinasabi na may pandarayang nangyari sa pagpalit ng server. Ang sinasabi kong pandaraya ang yung mga picture, yung mga video na nakita natin na sa ibang lugar hindi pinabayaan maboto. Meron akong mga video na siguro nakita na naman ng lahat ng tao, mga bago mag-rally na nagbibigayan ng pera, ng vote buying, etc. etc. Lahat yan. Pandaraya lahat yan. Kaya maliwanag dahil meron nga kaming ebidensya na may pandaraya. Ngayon, kung yung pandarayang yan ay doon lamang sa vote buying, doon lamang sa intimidation, doon lamang sa hindi pinayagan bumoto ang ibang botante, kung hindi, doon pati sa transparency server, doon pa rin sa system log, sa audit log, ay ibang usapan yan. Dahil wholesale na yan. Kaya't yan ang aming gustong makita. Kaya't yan ang aming hinahanap at humihingi kami ng authorization galing sa COMELEC na tignan para malaman. Siguro naman ako na mauuna na matutuwa kapag malaman ko na hindi nagka-problema.
Tama, Mr. President.
Ako na ang unang-unang magsasabi, mas gumanga ang aking loob dahil alam ko na ang nangyari. Ang problema, hindi na ipapaliwanag ng mabuti ng COMELEC at hindi tayo pinababayaan na tignan ng mabuti para iliwanag ng mabuti kung ano ba talaga ang nangyari sa loob ng mga server, sa loob ng ating mga transmission, sa loob ng ating mga vote counting machine.
Mr. President, kung ikaw na po yung unang gagaan ang loob, ako na po yung pangalawang gagaan ng loob kapag naibukas na po ang lahat ng iyan. And I would like to thank the gentleman for answering my questions. And I know it's a very trying time for him and his family. And thank you for answering my questions, Mr. President. But for the record, I'd also like to reiterate what the good gentleman from Ilocos Norte had said, which is, pagdating sa transparency server, wala pa talagang masasabing dayaan dahil hindi pa nga ito nalalaman. Thank you very much for that, Mr. President. Mr. President, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Mark.
Thank you.
The session is suspended. Smiling. Why are you smiling?
Congratulations.
Session is resumed. The Majority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 3211 under Committee Report Number 471. This pertains to the proposed Anti-Distracted Driving Act.
Any objection? Hearing and consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the sponsor delivered sponsorship speech on February 3. I move that we open the period for of interpellations.
Can the chair have a copy of the measure? Can we, before we act on the motion, can we have a 1-minute suspension? Ready? How do we... Sige, Alan, let's go. Great.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Osmeña.
Senator Osmeña is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I believe on this particular bill, Senate Bill 3211, we are in the period of committee amendments. There is one committee amendment, Mr. President.
Before that, Mr. President, there are no interpellations, so I move that we close the period of interpellation.
As the sponsorship speech has been delivered on the record, Mr. Majority Leader, or is there no sponsorship speech?
It has been delivered on February 3, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. There are no interpellations. There being none, the period for interpellation is hereby terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we open the period for amendments.
Period for amendments is in order.
Committee amendments on page 2, line 23, after the words make or receive calls, to insert the phrase "and other similar acts," comma. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
And that is the extent of our committee amendments. May I ask that the period of committee amendments be closed?
Any objection? Hearing none. Terminated.
There are no reservations for individual amendments, Mr. President. I move that we close the period for individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, may I request that we approve this on second reading?
Mr. Majority Leader.
Yeah, Mr. President, I move that we approve Senate Bill number 311 under Committee Report number 471 on second reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 3211 under Committee Report 471 is approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 3211 under Committee Report 471.
So suspended.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill 6080 under Committee Report 472. This pertains to the proposed National Electrification Administration Reform Act. Mr. President.
Consideration of the measure in second reading is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the sponsor delivered a sponsorship speech last February 3. I move that we open the period of interpellations.
I'm sorry?
I move that we open the period of interpellation.
Period for interpellation is in order.
Sir President, I move that we recognize Senator Osmeña.
Senator Osmeña is recognized.
Sir President, no member has registered their intention to interpellate. With the permission of the sponsor, I move that we close the period for interpellation.
For the record and for the information of the chair, can Senator Osmeña just provide a very brief synopsis of the bill?
Would you like to repeat that, Mr. President?
Yes. For the record, Senator Osmeña, can we have a brief summary of the bill? What does it basically regulate or provide?
Sometime 2 years ago, this representation sponsored the new NEA charter the new charter of the National Electrification Administration, giving the NEA stronger powers and step-in rights in case of mismanagement observed at the local electric cooperative level. Some of the representatives of the local electric cooperatives felt that some of the provisions were quite strong and limited their independence, and as you will see from the committee amendments which we intend to introduce, it would just loosen up the nominations for members of the electric cooperatives. Mr. President, this bill was sponsored in the House by Congressman Umali, Masongsong, Paduano, Relampagos, Sakaluran, Dayanghirang, et al. And I believe that there is merit in the amendments that they propose. It is specifically House Bill 6080 as amended by the Senate Committee on Energy has the following key provisions. The bill disqualifies a person who holds an elective office higher than the position of barangay captain from becoming a member of the board of directors. In the original law, Mr. President, it was grade level 16, which is quite low and is below the position of barangay captain. And the House representatives believe that it would not be harmful to allow a barangay captain from running and being elected as a member of the board of directors of an electric cooperative. The bill also disqualifies a person or a person's spouse who has been a candidate in the last preceding local or national elections for positions higher than the barangay chairman. and from becoming a member of the board of directors of an electric co-op. The bill also directs the board of directors of each cooperative to establish a screening committee that would review the qualifications of the candidates for the said board to be composed of the following: 1, a representative from academia as chairperson; 2, a representative from the business community who must be a member of the Chamber of Commerce of that province; 3, a representative from the civil society based in the region; 4, a representative from the religious community within its franchise area. It also modifies the minimum qualifications of a director or officer of the electric cooperative from requiring that such director or officer, 1, must be a Filipino citizen; 2, must be able to read and write; 3, must possess a 5-year experience in management; 4, must at least be 21 years of age; 5, must be of good moral character; 6, must be a member of the electric co-op in good standing for the last 12 months immediately preceding the election or appointment; 7, must be an actual resident and consumer in the district to be represented for at least 2 years immediately preceding the election; 8, must have attended at least 2 annual general membership assemblies for the last 3 years immediately preceding the election or appointment. By introducing the screening committee, Mr. President, we shall be improving on the purpose for which RA 10531 was passed, that is, to maximize professional management and minimize unnecessary political interference by strengthening transparency and accountability in the election of the members of the board of directors of the electric cooperatives. Admittedly, RA 10531 is a very recent law, and as the stakeholders have said, should be given time to be implemented before amending it. But we noted a number of problems in the electric cooperative sector that have ensued, notwithstanding the good intentions of said law. While we recognize that electric co-ops remain to be private sector initiatives, the distribution of electricity is an activity imbued with high public interest. Hence, the public remains affected by whatever problems beset the sector. With this in mind, Mr. President, I call on our esteemed colleagues to support the immediate passage of this measure.
Just a few clarificatory questions from the chair.
Certainly, Mr. President.
Just a clarificatory question. On page 2, Senator Osmeña, no person shall be elected or appointed as an officer or run as a board member of an electric cooperative if the person or the person's spouse has been a candidate in the last preceding local or national election. This question, would this include barangay election?
Mr. President, it's for positions higher than the position of barangay chair.
So it does not include, in other words...
Before, Mr. President, the existing law says grade 16.
Okay.
So that includes barangay captains.
Okay.
At hiningi ng mga congressmen to allow the inclusion of barangay captains. So we just reworded it that no one who ran for an elective position higher than the position of barangay captain in the preceding election may qualify to stand for election to the board of directors of the electric co-op.
So the conclusion of the chair is that being a candidate in the last barangay election is not a disqualification.
That's correct.
Thank you for the record. The next issue, Mr. Sponsor, is we mentioned here about the screening committee.
May we have the line and the page?
Yes, on page 3, line 8, one of the members of the screening committee is a representative from the religious community. The question that the chair would like to raise is, has this been reviewed in terms of a violation of the separation of church and state?
No, I don't think so, Mr. President. We are not giving any subsidies to religion, but the members of the House felt that...
No, we're not giving, it's not a question of subsidies, Senator Osmeña. It's a question of whether or not it violates the principle of separation of church and
Not
state.
to my mind, Mr. President. You know, even in America, until the Catholic Church itself prohibited it, there were priests who became members of U.S. Congress. So it's not a violation. There was Father Drinan, who was a congressman from Massachusetts, sitting in the House of Representatives in America.
Yes, except that it also happened, except that they present themselves for election. And in this particular case, this is an appointive
You are correct,
position.
Mr. President, but these are merely selection committees.
Well, yeah. Anyway, I'm just raising the
We're
question.
willing to delete this if...
In fact, Senator Osmeña, I am not sure. I am asking whether or not this has been reviewed in that sense. If you're saying it has been reviewed and that you see nothing wrong with it, we will accept that as the view
Thank you, Mr.
on the
President.
floor. Yes, okay, Mr. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, no other members wish to ask questions or interpolate. I move that we terminate the period of interpellation.
Period for interpretation is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we open the period for amendment.
Period for amendment is in order.
There are committee amendments, Mr. President, on page 2, line 9, to delete the word above and insert the phrase higher than. I submit, Mr. President.
Higher than. Any objection? Hearing none.
It will now read, the person holds any elective office higher than the position of.
Can I have a 1-minute suspension just to clarify on a matter of procedure? Session is resumed. Senator Osmeña, Ms. once were recognized. We have already approved the amendment on line 9, deleting the word above.
Our next amendment, Mr. President, would be on line 10 to delete the word captain and in its place insert the word chairman. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Here none. Approved.
Our next amendment would be on line 13 after the word elections to insert the phrase for positions higher than barangay chairman. I I submit, Mr. President. The next amendment falls on line 18 to delete the word use and insert the word sale. I submit, Mr. President.
No objection, none approved.
Then the next amendment would fall on line 22 to delete the phrase "and operations." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And on the same line, after the word cooperatives, to delete the word "are" and insert the word "is." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
Then from lines 23 to 25 to delete the following phrase, "and the independence of the board and officers of electric cooperatives is upheld, the NEA shall." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And on line 28, before the phrase "a screening committee," to delete the word "create." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And after the word "each," on the same line, to delete the words "of the." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On the next line, line 29, to make the word cooperatives singular, so delete the letter S. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And after that word, to delete the word district. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And to insert in its stead the following phrase, "is hereby directed to be established by its board of directors, comma." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
The next amendment would fall on page 3, line 1, to delete the entire subsection A, which reads "regional director of the CDA or the duly authorized representative of the regional directors as chairperson." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And then in its place, to insert the new phrase, subsection A representative from the academe as chairperson, semicolon. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 4, editorial, to delete B and to delete the letter, no, I'm sorry, there's no such thing. To insert the letter A before the word representative. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On the same line, after the word community, to insert the sentence, "who must be a member of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry," in parentheses, PCCI, close parentheses, "of the province or city where the concerned electric cooperative is located," semicolon. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 5, to delete subsection C, which reads "representative from the academe." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 6, to renumber subsection, the letter D now becomes letter C, and the word A is inserted before the word representative. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 8, to renumber, the letter E now becomes the letter D, and to insert the word A before the word representative. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And in the same line, after the word after community, to insert the phrase "within its franchise area." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 9, to delete the phrase "representatives from the public sector," and in its place to insert the phrase "the members of the screening committee." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 10, after the word "appointed," delete the phrase "by the chairperson, comma," and insert in its phrase "base." In its place, the word "based," BASED. I submit, Mr. President.
Objection approved.
On line 12, to delete the word "also." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And at the end of the line, to delete the phrase "private sector representatives," and in its place to add the words "said nominees." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 25, after the words "experience in," to delete the phrase "any field of expertise or profession," and in its place to insert the word "management." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On page 4, on line 4, after the words "in good standing," to insert the phrase "for the last 12 months immediately." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On line 10, to delete the word 5 and each numerical, and insert the word 3 the numerical 3 in parentheses. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And that is the extent of our committee amendments. I propose that we close the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is terminated.
Mr. President, there have been no reservations for individual amendments. I move that we close the period for individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none. Period for individual amendments is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading House Bill 6080 under Committee Report 472.
Any objection? Hearing none. House Bill number 6080 under Committee Report 472 is approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we suspend consideration of House Bill 6080.
Suspended.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2948 under Committee Report number 500. This pertains to the proposed National Vision Screening Act, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of the measure is in order on second reading.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is the sponsor delivered a sponsorship speech last February 3, 2016. I move that we open the period of interpellation.
Period for interpellation is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Pia Cayetano.
Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Mr. President, there are no reservations for interpellations. I move that we close the period of interpellation.
Period for interpellation is hereby terminated.
I move that we open the period for amendments, Mr. President.
Period for amendments.
Yes, Mr. President, we have committee amendments, just two. On page 2, after line 18, insert the sentence, "The private school shall be encouraged to adopt their own system of vision screening for kindergarten pupils enrolled in their respective schools, subject to standards under the NVSP." Period. Submitted, Mr. President.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none.
The next amendment, Mr. President, is on page 3. After line 2, insert the sentence, "For kindergarten pupils enrolled in private schools, the funding needed for the implementation of their respective schools' vision screening program shall be assumed by the private schools concerned." Submitted.
Can we have that again?
Yes. For kindergarten pupils enrolled in private schools, the funding needed for the implementation of their respective schools' vision screening program shall be assumed by the private schools concerned. Submitted.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none. With the permission of the chamber, we declare 1 minute recess.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
There are no other committee amendments, Mr. President.
All right.
Move to close the period of committee amendments, Mr.
Period for
President.
committee amendments is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2948 under Committee Report number 500.
In the open close period of committee amendments, individual amendments.
There are none.
There are none. There are no, Mr. President, for the record, there are no reservations for individual amendments.
Let me correct myself, Mr. President. I move that we close the period for amendments.
Period for individual amendments terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2948 under Committee Report number 500.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I move we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 2948.
Any objection? The approved.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill 4366 under Committee Report 501. This pertains to the proposed Antipolo City National Science and Technology High School.
In order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure sponsor delivered her sponsorship speech February 3, 2016. I move that we open the period of interpellations.
Period for interpellation is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Pia Cayetano.
Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Mr. President, there are no reservations for interpellations. I move that we close the period of interpellation.
Period for interpellation is terminated.
Mr. President, there are no committee nor individual amendments, so I move that we close the period for amendments.
Approved.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading House Bill number 4366 under Committee Report number 501.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I move that we suspend consideration House Bill 4366.
Suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill 5746 under Committee Report 468. This pertains to the proposed Mayor Hilarion A. Ramiro Senior Medical Center, Mr. President.
Consideration of measure is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the sponsor delivered his sponsorship speech last February 3. I move that we open the period of interpellation.
Period for interpellation is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator
Senator
Pia Cayetano.
Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there are no reservations for interpellation. I move that we close the period for interpellation, but I also would just like to recognize the presence of Representative Omanal, who is here. He's the sponsor of this measure in the House.
The presence of Congressman Uminal is made of record. There is a motion to
close the period of interpellation, Mr. President.
So closed.
Mr. President, there are no
committee nor any reservations for individual amendments, Mr. President.
So I move that we close the period of amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none. Period for amendments is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading House Bill 5746 under Committee Report 468.
Any objection? Hearing none. So approved.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of House Bill 5746.
So suspended.
Mr. President, we are in receipt of the Conference Committee report on disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 1618 and House Bill number 4730 on Exact Change Act. Copies of the report have been distributed to the senators. Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, exact change is coming. I move that we consider the aforesaid Conference Committee report.
Consideration of the measure is in consideration of the bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill 4730 and Senate Bill 1618 is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Bam Aquino, to present the bicameral Conference Committee report.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, I have the honor to submit a copy of the Conference Committee report with a joint explanation on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1618, entitled An Act Requiring Business Establishments to Give Exact Change to Consumers, and House Bill number 4730, entitled An Act Requiring Business Establishments to Give Exact Change to Consumers, as my sponsorship speech, and consider this read in toto into the records, Mr. President.
Mr. Majority Leader.
No objection, Mr. President.
All right.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the Conference Committee report on disagreeing provisions on Senate Bill number 1618, the House, and House Bill number 4730 on Exact Change Act.
There is a motion that the Chamber approves and ratifies the bicameral conference of committee report and the joint explanation of the conference committee on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill 4730 and Senate Bill 1618. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, for the record, this is the No Shortchanging Act of 2016.
Yes,
Thank
the
you, Mr.
approval did not shortchange the sponsor.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
All right, there are no other items in our agenda. Yes, Senator Ejercito is recognized. What is the pleasure of the gentleman?
Yes, good evening, Mr. President. As Chairman of the Senate Committee on Economic Affairs, may I manifest that Senate is adopting the House version of Senate Bill number 2779, entitled An Act Declaring the Second Week of November as Economic and Financial Literacy Week, authored by Senator Sonny Angara, and under Committee Report number 335. The House version is House Bill number 5452 by Representatives Kimbo, Robredo, Batocabe, Belmonte, Romulo, Cojuangco, Kuwating, Waminal, Tugna, and Masongsom.
Is there a committee report on this measure?
Yes, Mr. President, but the final version of the bill transmitted to the House of Representatives by the Senate's bills and index contain typographical errors that is not found in the version reported out by the Committee on Economic Affairs approved by the Chamber.
Yes.
So to remedy this, Mr. President, the committee deems it proper to adopt the House version of the bill.
Yes. We have no objections to the measure in substance. We just want to make sure that the procedure is properly followed so that no questions will be raised. Can we have a 1-minute suspension? Session is resumed. Senator Ejercito.
Yes, Mr. President, after conferring with the author and the Senate leadership, I will now withdraw my motion.
Okay, the manifestation and motion of Senator Ejercito is withdrawn for the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may we remind our colleagues that pursuant to the Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 10, Congress, as a national board of canvassers for President and Vice President, shall convene in joint public session on May 24, 2016 at 2 p.m. at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that they may please attend because we need a quorum on the part of the Senate. Mr. President, I move that we suspend the session at, until 10 o'clock in the morning, Monday, May 30, 2016.
Session is suspended until May 30, 2016 at 10 a.m. So,